This is Robert Plank from DFY Generation. Are you doing enough? You probably don't think so, right? Are you doing enough to have people beating down your door, sales flooding in, people always wanting to talk to you? Well, you're always having to work your tail off, right? And what do others that you buy from have that you don't have? Well, they probably have a lot of content out there, right? They probably have a lot of traffic. They have a big list. They have a lot of friends. And if you think about those people that you buy from, at least me personally, I would say that I make two types of purchases. I make the type of purchase where if you think of like the spectrum of the levels of awareness, where if I'm way over on one side and I am not at all interested in buying, one day I just rocket to the end. And then the other type of purchase I make is where I've slowly over time gotten almost to the point of purchase. And then I finally see some sort of one little reminder. I see one little YouTube, one little social post, one little email. And finally, that's what pushes me over the edge. And I think that very few people even think about this process. And it's good that you're thinking about this right now because so few people out there, most of your competitors, are not thinking about the path that their buyers are taking in order to find them. And it's not a straight line path. It's not a one-day path. Sometimes it takes a while to get there. So how the heck can you tap into this? When you see some of these people, Gary Vee is one of these biggest examples of what the heck is he selling? Can you even pay him $100,000 or $1,000,000 to run an ad campaign? No, you don't even see a buy button. And he has this whole ocean of all this content, of all this attention, of all these people looking at what he's saying and doing. And within that ocean, there's a handful of ideal clients that end up buying from him. And if you think too much about your ideal clients and you say, I'm only going to talk to my ideal clients, you'll drive yourself crazy because there is a ton of waste involved, and waste is not necessarily a bad thing in your marketing. You have to make a lot of noise and put a lot of things out there and talk to a lot of people who are not your buyers because there's those handful of people within that huge ocean that will eventually make their way to you. So how the heck do you do this easily? How do you make this easy on yourself? How do you put out all the things that you should be doing? You should be putting out content. You should be joint venturing and talking with people. You should be having these things called speaking gigs and demonstrating your authority and talking to an audience of buyers. You should be doing all these things. You should be posting on social media consistently. And it seems like a long list. Now I've given you a big long to-do list of things that you should be doing. Well, it's time to stop shooting all over yourself and instead to make it easy on yourself. And imagine if all these things I just listed, the content, the social posting, the speaking gigs, the networking. Imagine if you could accomplish all those things by just taking one simple action, maybe not even every day, maybe once a week or a few times a month, and that was the easy button that then would distribute everything that you do, and you wouldn't even have to do a lot of planning. You could show up, you could be yourself, you could talk, and then the rest of it would just kind of figure itself out. The content, the posting, the keyword research, when you see these people who post like still graphics or video clips or podcasts consistently, that's all things that are built up over time. To pick on Gary Vee again, when you see clips of him, he's not really planning those. He's like sitting in a taxi cab. He's just standing around chit-chatting and somebody recorded that. And it's also time for you to stop thinking too much about the quality, because speaking of these authority figures, one time I saw a podcast where someone was interviewing the great legendary Tony Robbins, and he was sitting in his backyard with some headphones, not even earbuds, but like headphones with the wires coming down, and the wind was blowing, and it didn't even look like very good quality, but it didn't matter because what mattered was the person who was speaking and what that person had to say. So what do you have to say? Well, a lot of things, but you're holding yourself back by thinking it has to be too complicated. And the answer is, of course, for you to have a podcast. And I want to run your podcast for you. And your podcast will lead to many things, that your competitors are not even considering. Because when they think about what a podcast is, they think that they have to sit down and speak for 2 hours and have a fancy microphone and studio and lighting and foam padding. And those are all things that you should have and that can build up over time. But you also hear about this thing called authenticity. And you also hear about how it's better if you're a trusted friend instead of someone who's always scripted and fake and all those things. And your podcast doesn't have to be just sitting down and always thinking of new things to say. In fact, your podcast should be interviews. I have a podcast called The Marketer of the Day, and I have over 900 interviews on there. I just recently launched a podcast for a client where we have 31 episodes like coming out consistently. And the thing about you interviewing other experts in your industry is this is your chance for networking. This is the chance for you to break out of your bubble because you are who you surround yourself with. And if you're surrounded by people of a certain threshold or level of income, then that will be yours, which is both good and bad, right? Because it means that at least your income will be here, but it won't be here. But it also means that you'll be surrounded by the same old way of doing things, the same old ideas. And what's really scary is that if you're around too many negative naysayers and self-sabotagers, then they themselves will rub off on you and they will hold you down and keep you where you're at. And so you've heard that maybe you need to get out more and that you need to find new people and kind of freshen the, maybe not the dating pool, but freshen the networking and the marketing pool. So that way you can get some new ideas and you can be energized by new people. And there are people, and the people that you need to speak to and should speak to, they are going on podcasts all day long. They are always pursuing these speaking gigs, and you should be more like them. And what happens is, let's go back to that example of Tony Robbins or Gary Vaynerchuk. Say you had Gary Vaynerchuk on your podcast. What would that mean for you? It would mean a lot of things. It would mean that, first of all, you're speaking with someone who otherwise would not give you the time of day, and at any point in the future, weeks, months later, you would have this person's email address and you could contact them under the guise of, well, remember our, remember our podcast interview all those weeks ago when I drank a water halfway through? And we just left it in because we were doing things off the cuff. We weren't trying to make everything 100% polished. But you email the fictitious Gary V months later, and you can say, well, look, here's all the things I'm still doing to promote our podcast episode. I'm tweeting, I'm posting, I transcribed it, I turned it into something where it's like written words now, and it's your excuse to continue talking with this person. But what else does it mean? It means that now you're in a video with both of you side by side. And yeah, you have to be on video because that's how things are done in the modern post-pandemic Zoom age. Just be on video. It's not a big deal anymore. So now you're on video with this person. But it also means that you're in many video clips. You can post on the TikToks, on the Facebooks, on the LinkedIns, on the Twitters, on the YouTubes. It means that you can rank for their name plus you, and it means that you can rank for their keywords and for their search terms. And it's kind of like a mutual link swap where someone appears on your show, and the benefit to you is that you are getting content for your show, and you don't really have to do a lot of work. You're just asking some questions, and then you get traffic based on this person's popularity and name recognition. Someone, if Gary V's on your show and someone searched Gary V, someone searches content marketing, someone searches other keywords and phrases that Gary V said on your show, then that is all these traffic sources for them to find you, and it's social media content and it's networking. But then Gary V also benefits because he's appearing on all these shows, including yours, and he gets all this traffic that adds up when now all these other audiences are finding him. So this is one of these modern day networking techniques, but it's also one of the oldest networking techniques that there is. And it doesn't rely on flash in the pan search engine optimization. The search engine optimization is just putting out a lot of content, seeing what comes back. It doesn't rely on on expensive Facebook, Google, or YouTube ads, although that can be a thing that you add on to the content that you're doing. But the big thing to keep in mind is that you need to get started, and that you need to stop letting your self-sabotage, self-doubt, self-limiting beliefs tell you things like you have to wait to do it. You don't have to wait. You could start today if you let yourself. You need to stop telling yourself that it needs to be perfect. The technology and your process will grow over time. And I'm from DFY Podcast, which means that we will set your show up for you, and we can work with you, and we can create different colors and graphics and things like that until we get it dialed in into what your vision is, keeping in mind that if you don't have a perfectly solid vision at this very moment, that is something that can evolve over time. Over time, the name of my podcast has evolved, the format, the colors, the graphics, the website, all of that is something that can and should evolve over time for you. But what's required from that, and the thing to reduce your hesitancy, is to always be putting stuff out there, right? And trying out your material. You hear about how comedians will go all around the country for years, and they'll try out different jokes, and they'll develop things, and they won't just sit in a corner and figure this stuff out. They'll take their show on the road, and they'll see what changes, what evolves, what works out. And that's what you should do as well. So stop overthinking content creation, networking, speaking gigs, etc. Create a podcast, create an interview podcast. Let me and my team create and run your podcast for you. Our website is called DFY Podcast, and your master plan needs to be step 1, create a podcast. We put you in a Slack chat room, and we just have a conversation, and you answer a couple of quick questions, and we set up your podcast for you. And then what you can and should do is make a couple of recordings. And in this day and age, there's no excuse. You pull out your phone, you hit the button, you hop on a Zoom room, you go to the Zoom website, you click on Create Meeting. You don't even invite anyone else, you just hit the record button, and now you have a video recording of yourself just in a one-person Zoom room. And that's great practice for you for later, because you invite someone else. Now you have yourself and the person side by side, and you give us the recording. We take that recording, put it on all the podcast platforms. I'm talking about YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Audible, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora, etc. And so that way, if someone asks their smart speaker, their Alexa, to play some podcast episode by you, or with the name of your show, or with some of the keywords that you're speaking, then that show appears in their Alexa speaker. If someone subscribes to you on YouTube, sees you on social media, my team will be making regular posts with graphics and video clips of content from your show. And then, of course, if someone searches for you on Google or YouTube or places like that, because your one podcast episode is placed on all of these locations, and then from that one podcast episode, we create all these little clips and we post all that times, so multiplied by you doing this at least somewhat on a consistent basis. But now it's a lot easier because you just have to show up. Now this is a traffic source that is multiplying for you. So that's step 1 and 2, I guess, right? Step 1, set up your podcast. Step 2, post some sort of content. And don't psych yourself out. Don't tell yourself that you have to wait until you have 50 episodes recorded, or that you need to post regularly or weekly or monthly. Those are all lies that you're telling yourself, because you are a little bit scared, and it's okay to be, because this is something new. But don't let those lies, don't let those stories stop you from creating a podcast. Just create one. And and it can become consistent over time once you have a content runway. Once you have so many episodes that they're just, if you put them all out right now, you'd be putting out something once per day, and it's better to space them out. That's what gives you consistency, not necessarily planning so much, just having so much in the queue that it kind of has to be regular and consistent. So anyway, you put out the podcast, and then you contact these people who are on podcasts all day long who would love to be on your show and have these conversations. And this is a lot of fun because you can show up and almost ask the same 5 or 4 questions, right? You ask somebody, how'd you get started? What are you doing that's unique in your industry? What beginner mistakes do you see somebody make? What's an easy first step to get started? Maybe what's a big mistake, or what drives you crazy, or what do you wish you knew 10 years ago? And finally, where's your website? And it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. You have a conversation. And so now you're building your traffic and your authority and your ranking because you have these guests on your show. You're building your network. And then here is where it gets interesting, because what if you had me and my team consistently finding guests for your show, and they just came to you, and then you can get the criteria dialed in, and you say, I want someone on my show who ticks these boxes, right? Who is my ideal client? And instead of going out and trying to find them, have them come to you and say, here's the type of guest that I want to have on my show. I want them to have this size business, this level of income in this industry and not that industry. And imagine if you had that quickie list and you said, I want the people that I talk to just be these people. And so this way, this is fun for you, because when you do the initial podcast conversation and the recording's done, you can have a quick conversation. You can follow up, and they know you a lot better because they sat there and they spent 20 minutes with you, and they wouldn't have had that connection with you otherwise. So that is a way for you to bring in some ideal clients, but then it can get even better than that, because we talked about how you need to do more speaking gigs, right? You need to appear on much more stages, more platforms, tap into more audiences. And imagine if someone was on your show. Now it's a lot easier for you to be on their show if they have one. Or many times there are some of these podcasts with lots of traffic that are hard for you to get on, and maybe they just don't want to just let you on their show just because. But if you say, well, I would like to be on your show in an exchange, you can also be on my show, now that is a way in. And many times over the years, I've had someone say, well, I want to be on your show and you can be on my show in return. So that's even been a thing where it was their idea and it was a thing that they offered. So imagine this: if you built this online asset, this traffic getting machine that had this built-in audience that other people wanted to be on. It wasn't just something that existed, but it was something that other people wanted. Other people wanted to be on your show, and then you can get all these other things from them, including their friendship and their traffic and their ranking, but also the opportunity for you to be on their show and then further promote your podcast program, your podcast show. And then, because now that is out there in the world, now you can use that and you can get on other podcast shows as well. So going back to the Gary Vee example, and then we'll wrap up, I promise. Imagine if you had Gary Vaynerchuk on your show, and then you somehow parlayed that into then being on his show. Now you could take that and say, look, I was on Gary Vee's show, and you could market that to other podcasters. And you can say, hey, would you like to be on this show? Because here's me on the Gary Vee show. Can I be on your show? And here's me also with him. That's something where it's both the newest technique around, but it's also the oldest technique around. It's networking. And if you've ever been frustrated, held back, let down by others who seem to have it so dang easy, and everyone else just seems to have such an easy time making friends, or maybe it feels like all the cliques are already set up, or maybe you just think, man, like there's this circle of friends out there and I see all these people promoting each other. I'd love to get in on that. Well, you can. And there's so many opportunities out there. There's so many fish in the sea. There's so many new businesses being started and so many new people coming into business that it's not too late, but it will be too late if you keep on hesitating like you've been doing so far. And up until now, that's okay. And maybe you didn't have a plan. Maybe you didn't know exactly what to do. Maybe you made it too complicated. Let me make it less complicated for you. Create a podcast. Let me and my team create a podcast for you. We are DFY Podcast, and we want to create this thing that is a traffic getting asset for you, that gives you the speaking gigs, that gives you the networking, that gives you the content, so that way you can focus on what's more important to you, which is the strategy, the bigger picture, and that way you're not caught up in all the day-to-day. Because if you've ever looked into podcast production, podcast setup, video production, all the social media and video editing and everything else that's involved with that, it's not a lot of fun. And it's time consuming, it's a slog, and I'd rather that me and my team handle that for you. That way you can focus on your message and on your speaking and on your networking and your joint venturing. So don't wait, and speak to me and join us in DFY Podcast. We'd love to have you. We'd love to help you out. We'd love to get you to where you know that you need to go. So join us at DFY Podcast and think about what you need to be doing that you aren't doing. And the answer is podcasting. But don't let your previous self-limiting beliefs about podcasting hold you back. It's not what you thought what it was all these years, and it's not what a lot of people say it is. It's your chance to network and to get a lot of these sort of leveraged results from not a lot of work, from just showing up and having these interviews, having these conversations. So DFY Podcast, I'm Robert Plank. Let's talk, and we'll see you soon.